Glasses off.
All right, welcome back. We are on air from our prospective homes this time. I've got Cindy Wahler back on Girlfriend We Need to Talk. How are you?
I'm very well. And you, Leanna, nice to have me back, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. So Cindy was with us last time and we had a pretty good, I thought, great conversation about millennials and managing millennials in the workplace. And now we have a brand new challenge that we're facing, huge one with COVID-19. And the majority of our countries, because you're in Canada right now and I'm in the US of A, are working remotely if they're blessed enough to be working at all right now, because it's a struggle for a lot of people. So Cindy reached out to me and said, hey, this is an interesting topic right now. Why don't we talk about this? And I was all in. So Cindy, take it away. Let me know your thoughts on our current situation.
Thank you, Leanna. Absolutely. So this is uncharted waters, and you are right that most of us, if we're fortunate enough, are working remotely and at home, and it requires a different type of leadership and leadership oversight for our teams, our employees, and how we check in and how we communicate. So there's certain tips and strategies that we all need to be aware of as we lead our teams, as we keep people productive, focused, and balanced with the anxiety and the stressors they may have in their personal and family lives too.
Right. And there are plenty of those right now. I mean, I know that kids are at home, varying ages, so they're forced in a way, but faced with school, homeschooling, doing their own jobs, having spouses in the house, all of those good things. So what might be some good tips for leaders in trying to keep their people focused and keep teams cohesive?
That's a great question. So first off, I think we need to understand that everybody experiences anxiety and how they cope with anxiety differently. And so the way you might or I may differ from our team members. And so there are some who, for example, thrive in this kind of environment. They're very transactional, love process, organized, planful, structured, and they're able to really execute as communication changes, as guidelines change. Others who are much more strategic, conceptual, may have more of a challenge because they're thinking always ahead. And we do need to think about ahead how the workplace will have changed dramatically and various industries will be changed dramatically. So it is about thinking around how each of us copes differently with anxiety and stress and being sensitive to that. And if I broadly think about the population, if we just, for way of example, for the purposes of this podcast, think about the population in terms of introverts and extroverts, in many ways, for introverts, this is a dream come true because they get to work at home, they have more time to reflect, less interruptions, less back-to-back meetings. And so this is where they are more comfortable because they're not forced in close proximity in that kind of physical collaboration way. And by the same token, extroverts who are much like solar panels and drink energy from other people are finding it stressful in that way because they don't have that kind of human contact. They are cooped up in the same office, or if they want to move around, it's just moving from one room to another in their home, and they have different levels of stress. And so you need, as a leader, to be mindful of that, how everyone is adjusting and how various members of the team need more or less communication depending on that.
Right, that's a very good point. I know that I'm handling it better than I have a coworker who's very, very social, an extreme extrovert. If you're familiar with Strengths Finders, he's got woo, so he's always out there. Yeah, he organizes Friday virtual happy hours, and in the driveway having a beer while his neighbors in their driveway across the street. He's trying every angle, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind is letting people kind of express that piece of that. But I have found that some people that I know are struggling more than others for the reasons that you just expressed. But that anxiety, because in the background, I'd love to know your thoughts on the fact that in the background of all of this trying to adapt to a new working environment, we're faced with the updates every day on what's going on, right? I mean, most of us probably have somebody who lives in one of the hot spots. I certainly have had a couple people in my life who've been diagnosed, so knock on wood, they're doing well. But so tips, turn the TV off. What are some of your thoughts on some of this?
Sure. So if you just step back and think about what creates anxiety, regardless of whether it's COVID, illness, issues around mortality, fear of flying, fear of illness, or any type of fears that we have, the underlying commonality is a worry about loss of control. And so when we don't
Mhm.
feel in control, then we start to ruminate and obsess about what we're going to do about it. And to your point, when we're inundated with all kinds of information from the media, from the internet, and we are worried about relatives and family members across the globe, it can become overwhelming and too much. And so what it does mean is we need to step back. What is it in our environment that we can control to the degree that helps us normalize our home and our world? And so I love the example, Leanna, of one of your colleagues who's setting up virtual cocktail hours in his driveway. And I do recommend that leaders have a daily huddle, a weekly stand up, stand tall meeting where everybody's gathered around and share some anecdotes, funny stories, humorous stories around how they're coping. A number of WebEx and Zoom calls that I've been on, children are in the background waving to get their parents' attention, my clients' attention with their laptops. They need help with their computer. We've had visitors such as pets, dogs, and cats appear in meetings as well. And that just humanizes things. And we also are looking to each other to share tips and strategies together. What is working, and what time, what hours of the day do you just shut the media off and maybe read your book, watch something on Netflix, be creative with whatever artistic endeavors that might interest you, so that you at least can control part of your world. The other part, though, is too, even though the information, as you say, is fluid and is changing, and in some places is very disparaging, the point is that this is a cycle, like other cycles in the past, like the Spanish flu and other kinds of virulence that we've had to deal with historically. We do come through this both economically, financially, practically, and from a health point of view. And so we need to think about that, that if we are doing the right thing and following the guidelines, that most of us will be healthy and will be safe, and the economy will pick up and return back to the pre-COVID state.
Right, right. And I think it's a really important piece in the role as a leader to help to reassure folks, but also help to make sure that they're following those guidelines to a certain extent when it comes to, making sure everybody else is safe. I mean, I think being a leader is literally that, right? I mean, you take that role of kind of being the example, setting the example.
I love what you're saying now, because this is an opportunity for those leaders to stand tall. And like one of my colleagues said to me, how do you take this situation and really benefit and prosper? So if we look at the point of view that business will not conduct itself in the same way again, then what is positive about that? So we are absolutely advancing digitization. We are
Yes.
advancing cultures where a number of clients, my clients and others, have never supported working remotely. And it's been a challenge for them historically because they haven't been able to attract great talent and retain great talent. And now, by virtue of not having a choice, they will see how dedicated, focused, productive, even more productive and happier the employee population is, and employee engagement, and therefore retention. So good things come out of it. And you are absolutely right in terms of individual leaders. There are leaders who are very confident, emotionally resilient, and have a combination of being great stewards and instructing and facilitating firm discussions. And those leaders really have had a great balance around really guiding their teams through this, because they're creating confidence in their teams and they're giving latitude to their individual team members to get their work done.
Yes, excellent. Now, leaders have varying sizes of teams. Some people may have a couple folks on their team, which is a little easier to manage, and some people have larger teams. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. I know the team touch bases are really crucial, and thank goodness for Zoom and WebEx and all of the wonderful technology that we have in order to be able to do that. What about one-on-ones with people?
Absolutely crucial. You're right. I think the team ones are important as a collective and sharing insights, as well as to create delegation of tasks, collaboration on critical incidents that might be occurring, changes that they need to address. And then one-on-one allows you really to tap into how is that person doing. So as you say, Leanna, relative to having two career families now working at home together, having aging parents, having children, babies, toddlers at home. And so you may, as a leader, need to adjust timing of your meetings, when work gets done, and be really sensitive to those individuals and really tap into what does keep them up at night, what are they worried about, what are they anxious about. And those discussions allow you as a leader to have very confidential conversations and at the same time, hopefully mitigate or minimize some of their fears.
Right, and reassure. Because that, I mean, I think it's important to be that person, again, with the literal title of leader, to be that person that they feel that they can talk to in a situation like this, because loyalty and productivity and everything is affected by that. But just the fact that the relationship gets stronger is huge for everyone involved.
For sure. And what we really mean now in terms of, and you see this a lot, that leaders need to really shore up and demonstrate empathy. And what we mean by empathy is not just sensitivity to what people are going through and what they're experiencing, but also be realistic and genuine around what they do worry about, and not to minimize, not to gloss it over. These are real fears. And if you are a leader who is transparent and genuine and acknowledge that, which is different than a cheerleading type of leader,
Mhm.
then to your point, you absolutely will build that loyalty and that engagement.
Yes, definitely. What about self-care for our leaders? What are your thoughts
So
on that?
that's a great point. I was on a call more recently where there was some concern around various team members working all hours and not taking appropriate breaks. And in some ways, working remotely and in this situation has fostered that. And I think leaders need to role model to their teams around how to self-care. So you may choose to compose an email at 3 in the morning, but the idea is that you shouldn't send it, because you are then giving that mixed message around respecting people's time. And so the extent that leaders share how they are taking care of themselves, how they are engaging in breaks, whatever it is, whether it's their exercise, going for a walk, doing aesthetic creative endeavors, is something that they need to be mindful of, because if they don't, they will burn out and they will not be at their best and optimize what needs to be done for their teams, because this is something, as we understand, with each day that will get better, but by the same token, we have a number of weeks ahead of us, and we have to keep that in mind around how do you recharge, how do you refuel, and how do you take care of yourself and your partner and your family.
Right. I think another thing that's important, I'd love your thoughts on this, is, and I think that something that happens is we have, especially for businesses or leaders who have never been fond of the working from home remote deal. Some people on our teams need more attention for certain reasons. It could be that they maybe they're relatively new at the company. Maybe they just need more hands-on. But I think that what can happen is a tendency sometimes for those who are adverse to this remote situation is a certain level of policing that happens. And I get that there's a certain amount of, I've got to make sure I know what my team is doing, but there can be a negative side to that. Am I right?
So tell me more about that. Where are you going
Well,
with that?
I'm thinking in terms of trust, of trusting that your people are getting the job done, and I mean, not just giving them free rein, but I think that because we're adults, there needs to be a certain level of autonomy and some level of trust on a certain point, right, to a certain degree, that they are doing what it is that they need to do. But I don't think as leaders that constantly checking in and have you got this done and where are you at constantly every day. I mean, the check-in is important, but maybe I'm completely off base on that. Maybe that's just my personality and what I need.
Maybe it is, but
Maybe
I think you make a great point that the more we have oversight, and if it's too much oversight, then what we might be communicating is that you don't trust your team member, that you don't have confidence, and that you're not giving them latitude. And so if we go back to what it means to be a great leader, whether you're working remotely or whether you're working in bricks and mortar, the idea is that it is your responsibility as a leader to cultivate your successor, to cultivate leaders to go on to the next role. And part of those leadership around how they are evaluated is just based on that. Are you able to really grow leaders into roles that allow them to have more scope? And so they need to be reminded that part of their own metric is going to be that, absolutely. And you are right, Leanna, that it's a cultural shift around leaders that have never been comfortable, and they have the assumption that if somebody is physically in the office, they're working, where in fact that may not be true at all. And we have enough data to show that there are a certain number of employees who in fact are even more productive than they're working remotely, because they're happier around the flexibility of not when they work, but of how they work.
Right.
And I think you need to exercise that trust, and the employees can demonstrate their KPIs and their metrics and their deliverables that hopefully mitigate some of the fear around their managers that they might have, and as well that constant checking, because it's a message that is going to undermine the work that you get and the quality of work when you do that.
Right. So really, I think, personally, I think that the difference between coaching and micromanaging is who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. If you as a leader should be actually tapping into more than ever, because it is remote, with each and every one of your direct reports and ask them, what do you need from me now? What do you need from me in this environment? And then resurface that and revisit that, because maybe that employee needs something in the early days and then less so, based on frequency of contact, based on the actual level of guidance that they need. And so it's a bit of a learning curve and a dance between both parties that you need to be sensitive to, and is constantly shifting back to your point around what's going on in the globe, what's going on in the context of their city, municipal, provincial, federal, state guidelines that keep shifting. So those leaders who can pivot and be agile will be the best for their team members, because they understand that that's very much a fluid environment, and that's something to aspire to as a leader.
Absolutely. Any specific words of advice for those individuals who just recently became leaders and all of a sudden this happens? I mean, everything that you said so far is applicable, but anything's unique to their situation.
I think you're right. That's a great point, because they are new leaders, and so they will maybe the very first time being people managers. I would highly recommend that they tap into their own collegial network with leaders who are more seasoned and more experienced, and ask them, although we've not had to deal with this crisis, there are other critical events that have occurred in people's leadership in their lifetime, whether it be technology, whether it be 2008, the mortgage default, so that they can get that advice and that wisdom. I also think that they can create their own little hub for first-time leaders and share common practices
Mm.
around what's working. And so that's a support system that they can be creative about with each other and then pass that information on.
What a great idea.
I'm trying, I'm thinking on top of my head, Leanna, to be responsive to your timely questions.
Yeah, no, that's
You're
great.
spot on. You're
And
spot
you're always a wealth of information. I mean, follow this woman, follow Cindy, because she's got some great info. Where can people find you, Cindy Wahler?
So on Twitter at Cindy Wahler, on my website, cindywahler.com, and of course on LinkedIn. Everyone's welcome to follow me there. And once you post this podcast, then both you and I will be followed, which will be very welcome. So thank you for the opportunity once again.
Yes, and make comments. Give us your comments, because we are curious about how things are going in your world with these new challenges, and we hope everybody's staying safe, staying in, right?
Staying safe, staying healthy, and absolutely, you're right. Your followership will probably have some other great ideas that they can share with all your listeners and viewers. So that would be very welcome, as you suggest.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. It's always a joy. I'll have you back again, and certainly in the coming months, because I love talking to you, and you're a wealth of information. So
absolutely. Thank you again, Leanna, for the opportunity. Be well.
thank you. Yes, you too. Stay safe.
Bye now.
Bye.